May 28, 1940. Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring dropped the intelligence summary onto his desk, his disdain obvious. The report described President Roosevelt's appeal to Congress for a dramatic expansion of American aircraft production, an ambition to reach 50,000 airplanes per year. If the Americans think this sort of talk will intimidate us, they must be in dire straits, Göring remarked to his aides. They have no understanding of war industry. Let them attempt to repurpose their automobile plants. They will quickly discover that aircraft are not built with simple assembly lines. What Göring did not realize was that, in Detroit, a Danish-born industrialist named William Knudsen was already dismantling those assumptions. The former president of General Motors, now serving the Roosevelt administration for a token salary of $1 per year, was directing an industrial effort unlike anything seen before. In less than 4 years, American factories would exceed the ridiculed target of 50,000 aircraft per year, approaching 100,000, while equipping 2 massive war fronts separated by entire oceans. The statement that provoked German scorn had been delivered on May 16, 1940, as German armored divisions pushed rapidly through France. Addressing Congress, Roosevelt declared, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." Doubt followed immediately, even from friendly nations. In 1939, the United States had produced only 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps fielded roughly 1,700 combat planes, many already outdated. Roosevelt was calling for a 14-fold increase. That challenge fell to William Knudsen. When asked who could possibly accomplish such a task, presidential advisor Bernard Baruch replied without hesitation. First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen. Knudsen had left behind a $300,000 annual income to serve his adopted country, applying the logic of automotive mass production to aircraft manufacturing. Change came swiftly. By December 1941, U.S. factories were turning out 2,000 military aircraft each month, 20 times the output of just 2 years earlier. Ford announced plans for a massive bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded operations in Seattle. Douglas Aircraft recruited thousands of new workers. The arsenal of democracy was stirring. German leaders dismissed America's progress, their judgment clouded by racial ideology and deliberate denial. General Friedrich von Boeticher, Germany's military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, repeatedly sent detailed reports describing the scale of American mobilization. In December 1940, he warned that American war production will reach unimaginable heights. His assessments were ignored in Berlin, labeled pessimistic distortions. When von Boeticher met Hitler in February 1939 to discuss American industrial capacity, the Führer erupted into a tirade about racial inferiority instead of addressing the intelligence. Americans, he declared, were half Judaized, half Negrified, and incapable of enduring modern warfare. Such thinking would carry catastrophic consequences. This mindset spread throughout the regime. Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed reports of women working in aircraft factories as evidence of American weakness. The possibility that a democratic society could mobilize more effectively than a totalitarian state was inconceivable. Reports of factories operating 3 shifts around the clock were dismissed as exaggerations. Reality did not fit the Nazi worldview. Willow Run would soon embody that reality. Construction began on farmland on April 18, 1941. The complex became the largest factory ever built under one roof, 3.5 million square feet, with an assembly line stretching a full mile. Ford production chief Charles Sorensen pledged that the plant would produce one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour, while other facilities struggled to complete one per day. The early phase was disastrous. The first aircraft, completed in September 1942, required extensive rework. Defect rates reached nearly 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run was delivering only 56 bombers per month, far below expectations. Critics derisively nicknamed the project, "Will it run?" Progress came through persistence. Engineers broke the B-24's 488,193 components into standardized subassemblies. They introduced hydraulic riveting, pre-assembled wiring systems, and continuously moving production lines. Throughout 1943, they absorbed 578 design changes without halting output. By September 1943, production rose to 148 bombers per month. By December, it reached 365. The turning point arrived in April 1944, when Willow Run completed 428 B-24s, one aircraft every 63 minutes, operating without pause. A single American factory was now producing more bombers than the entire German aviation industry. German pilots noticed first. During the Tunisian campaign, Major Johannes Steinhoff, commander of Jagdgeschwader 77, wrote in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. What is most alarming is their growing numbers." The realization intensified in 1943. On January 27, American bombers struck targets inside Germany for the first time, with 64 aircraft attacking Wilhelmshaven. By October, during Black Thursday, over Schweinfurt, the United States could lose 60 B-17s and replace them within 2 weeks. The logic of numbers had taken over. During Big Week, from February 20th to 25th, 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces flew 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft production. The Luftwaffe suffered losses estimated between 262 and 355 fighters, but the more serious blow was the loss of roughly 100 experienced pilots, men who could not be replaced. General Adolf Galland informed Göring that Germany was losing approximately 1,200 fighters every month while managing to produce only 1,000. The comparison with the United States was devastating. American factories were turning out 2,500 fighters per month while losing just 400 in combat. Major Heinz Bahr, one of Germany's highest-scoring aces with 220 confirmed victories, recalled a mission over Brunswick in January 1944. The bomber formations, he said, stretched endlessly across the sky, no fewer than 700 flying fortresses and liberators. "We were 8 fighters against hundreds," he remembered. There was no hope. By 1944, American aircraft production had reached astonishing levels. In that single year, U.S. factories completed 96,270 aircraft, including 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. That 1 year alone surpassed Germany's total wartime aircraft production, estimated at approximately 94,677 units. The imbalance extended far beyond raw numbers. Each American bomber carried 13.50 caliber machine guns with thousands of rounds of ammunition. German fighters increasingly took off with reduced ammunition loads. American aircraft featured powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and sophisticated navigation systems. Many German fighters lacked reliable radios altogether. Industrial output continued to accelerate. By May 1944, Boeing's Seattle Plant 2 was producing 16 B-17 bombers every day. Douglas Aircraft, which had employed only 68 workers in 1936, had expanded to a workforce of 167,000 spread across 9 facilities. North American Aviation was producing 500 P-51 Mustangs each month. Lockheed achieved a production rate of 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes while simultaneously implementing 2,127 combat-driven design changes. Supporting industries kept pace. General Motors manufactured 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Packard produced 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Alcoa increased aluminum output by 600%. Dow Chemical expanded magnesium production from 6 million pounds annually to 333 million. The transformation of the American workforce directly contradicted Nazi assumptions. Women, who made up less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941, accounted for 65% by 1943, more than 310,000 women employed in the aircraft industry. At Douglas's Long Beach plant, 22,238 of 41,620 employees were women. Roswell Monroe, the original Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with 99.5% accuracy. At Douglas, female inspectors reduced defect rates from 3.2% to just 0.3%. Ford redesigned tools to fit smaller hands, unintentionally boosting productivity. Lighter pneumatic tools reduced worker fatigue, while improved workstation layouts lowered injury rates. German intelligence misread these developments. A captured Luftwaffe report dismissed female workers as a temporary measure and predicted declining quality. The opposite occurred. Precision improved. Women proved especially effective in tasks requiring fine detail, wiring, instrumentation, and inspection. Their integration demonstrated democratic strength, not weakness. As American output surged, Germany retreated into illusion. In February 1944, Göring approved the Jaeger program, dispersing aircraft production into 729 underground sites staffed by forced labor. The Mittelwerk complex alone employed 60,000 prisoners under brutal conditions, with approximately 20,000 dying. These facilities produced more defects than finished aircraft. Sabotage was common. Transport delays between scattered sites multiplied. Quality control disintegrated. The entire Mittelwerk operation produced fewer engines per month than Ford's single plant in Chicago. Meanwhile, American innovation advanced further. Boeing introduced modular construction for the B-29 across 4 separate factories, using fully interchangeable components. The pressurized B-29, costing $65,000 per aircraft, incorporated technologies Germany could not match even at the prototype stage. By early 1945, American factories were producing 100 B-29s per month. June 6, 1944, revealed the full consequence of American industrial power. The invasion of Normandy employed 11,590 Allied aircraft against just 319 German sorties, a superiority ratio of 36-1. This was not a matter of tactics but of industrial destruction. Between January and May 1944, preparatory bombing dropped 145,000 tons of explosives on German targets, more than Germany had dropped on Britain during the entire war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 airborne divisions in a single day, using more planes than Germany had ever possessed in its entire transport fleet. By December 1944, individual raids involved 1,200 bombers escorted by 900 fighters. P-51 Mustangs had the range to reach Poland, the performance to challenge any opponent, and were produced in numbers that rendered losses meaningless. German pilots nicknamed them Indians, appearing everywhere at once. As defeat loomed, even Nazi leaders acknowledged the industrial disaster. In December 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Göring's promises of Luftwaffe superiority now appear as criminal delusions. We are fighting the world's greatest industrial power with words." Before D-Day, Rommel told his staff, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy and still overpower us. When they land, their material superiority will be such that no position can be held." Even Hitler conceded the point. Speaking to Speer in January 1945, he admitted, "We should have listened to von Boeticher's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." Speer later testified that American bombing reduced German production by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated unequivocally that the systematic American assault on industrial targets caused the collapse of German armaments production. Germany's Me-262 jet fighter, which entered operational service in mid-1944, represented a genuine technological breakthrough. It was nearly 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring placed enormous faith in this so-called wonder weapon, convinced it could restore air superiority despite Germany's worsening numerical disadvantage. Yet production never matched ambition. Only 1,430 Mi-262s were built in total, and at no point were more than 200 operational at the same time. The jet engines required complete overhauls after just 10 hours of use. Shortages of critical materials forced the use of inferior substitutes, further reducing reliability. The United States, meanwhile, had initiated jet development as early as 1942. Although the Bell P-59 proved inferior to German jet designs, Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, superior to any German jet, entered production before the war ended. American industrial capacity allowed the simultaneous pursuit of multiple advanced technologies, a strategic luxury Germany no longer possessed. This contrast captured the true outcome of the production war. German technical superiority in jet aircraft proved meaningless against America's ability to manufacture tens of thousands of conventional fighters while developing the next generation at the same time. In total war, quality without quantity offered no salvation. Hermann Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945, by soldiers of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division marked the beginning of his forced confrontation with that reality. Initially defiant during interrogation in Augsburg, Göring insisted that German technology had been superior and that defeat resulted solely from overwhelming enemy numbers. His transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, a holding center for senior Nazi officials, subjected him to sustained questioning. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler conducted a series of interviews that documented Göring's gradual acknowledgement of American industrial dominance. "I knew American industrial potential was great," Göring admitted, "but the execution surpassed my worst expectations. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at its peak. It was beyond comprehension." He expressed particular astonishment at American logistics. "Your ability to supply forces across 2 oceans while maintaining production at home, this was inconceivable to us. We could not properly supply troops 500 miles from Germany. You supplied armies 5,000 miles from America." At the Nuremberg trials, prosecutors confronted Göring with overwhelming evidence of American production superiority. Charts demonstrated that by 1944 the United States was producing more aircraft in a single month than Germany managed in an entire year. Film footage of Willow Run's assembly lines played as prosecutors recited the names of German cities destroyed by bombers built in that one facility. Göring's testimony on March 14, 1946 revealed his inability to fully grasp the scale. "I believe the economic and technical potential of the United States, especially in aviation, was unusually great," he said. "But I never imagined aircraft production could increase 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible." Prison psychologist G. M. Gilbert recorded Göring's fixation on production figures. He repeatedly calculated ratios, comparing single American plants to Germany's total output. He became especially obsessed with Willow Run, referring to it as "that damned factory that broke our backs." When shown that the United States had produced 812,615 aircraft engines compared to Germany's 241,675, Göring stared silently at the numbers. The arithmetic of defeat required no further explanation. Even today, the magnitude of the transformation remains staggering. From just 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, the United States produced 295,959 by the end of the war, 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other aircraft. This represented not merely numerical dominance, but systemic superiority at every level of production. At peak output, 2 million Americans worked in aircraft manufacturing, drawn from an unprecedentedly diverse workforce. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elderly citizens all contributed. This democratic mobilization achieved what totalitarian command never could: voluntary cooperation that outperformed forced labor by every measurable standard. Workers who entered factories in 1941 with no prior aviation experience emerged in 1945 as the most skilled aircraft workforce in the world. They did more than build airplanes, they transformed manufacturing itself. Statistical quality control developed for bomber production became standard industrial practice. Automation techniques pioneered at Willow Run reshaped global industry. Engineers who designed bomber assembly lines would later design the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24s would raise the generation that walked on the moon. The production miracle did not end with victory. It inaugurated the American century. The financial scale defied conventional economics. Aircraft production consumed $45 billion in 1940s dollars, equivalent to roughly $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet instead of bankrupting the nation, wartime production generated unprecedented prosperity. Depression-era unemployment vanished. Personal income doubled between 1940 and 1945. War bond purchases by workers themselves financed much of the expansion. Employees at Willow Run alone bought $45 million in bonds, effectively funding their own factory's output. Germany, by contrast, devoted 40% of its entire industrial capacity to aircraft production by 1944, yet produced less than half the American total. Increasing reliance on slave labor proved catastrophically counterproductive. Sabotage was widespread. Quality collapsed. Productivity per German worker declined after 1943, even as American productivity rose by 300%. The industrial infrastructure built for war became the foundation of post-war prosperity. Aluminum smelters constructed to supply bomber production soon provided materials for America's post-war suburbs. Chemical plants built to refine aviation fuel became the backbone of the plastics industry for consumer goods. Machine tool factories that equipped aircraft plants retooled the entire American industrial base for global leadership. Yet beyond sheer output lay something even more decisive: organizational mastery. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies into a single, integrated system. IBM punch-card machines tracked millions of individual components moving through thousands of suppliers. At MIT, the Radiation Laboratory employed 4,000 scientists developing navigation systems that allowed American bombers to operate in all weather conditions. When combat revealed the B-17's vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing designed and installed chin turrets within 60 days. When Pacific operations demanded greater range, Consolidated modified the B-24 without interrupting production. Comparable German changes required months, sometimes years. American improvements took weeks. This adaptability proved as decisive as production volume itself. American aircraft evolved continuously, shaped by combat experience across the globe. Information from battles in the Pacific reached Atlantic production lines in a matter of days. German aircraft, built in isolated underground facilities by forced labor, remained largely unchanged, while American designs improved week by week. The feedback loop between frontline combat and industrial production reached an efficiency never before achieved. Pilots' observations went directly to engineers. Engineers' solutions reached assembly lines within days. Suggestions from assembly line workers flowed back to designers without obstruction. This open, democratic exchange of information consistently outperformed Germany's rigid hierarchical command structure. On October 15, 1946, just hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he offered his most explicit acknowledgement of the production war's meaning. "The Americans won through industrial power, not military skill," he wrote. "We were defeated not by better soldiers, but by better factories. The nation we dismissed as capable only of making consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under aluminum and steel." His final recorded remarks to psychologist G.M. Gilbert echoed the same realization. "We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed. They did not merely outproduce us, they transformed production itself. Every element of their system proved superior to ours." Göring took his own life that night, but his last testimony stands as history's verdict on the production war. The Reichsmarshal who had mocked American capabilities died knowing that a single American factory had exceeded the lifetime output of his entire air force. Military historians widely regard American industrial achievement as the decisive factor in Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material superiority it generated, D-Day would have been impossible, the bombing campaign unsustainable, and the Pacific War unwinnable. Richard Overy, the foremost historian of the air war, concluded that victory was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the weight of material. The Allies prevailed because they overwhelmed their enemies with an avalanche of production. The numbers support this conclusion unequivocally. By 1944, the United States alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined, Axis and Allied alike. This was not marginal superiority but dominance by an order of magnitude. Germany faced not mere defeat, but annihilation. Yet the significance of the production miracle extended beyond military victory. It demonstrated the superiority of democracy over dictatorship, of freedom over coercion, of voluntary cooperation over forced obedience. The workers who achieved this transformation were not slaves or conscripts, but free citizens united by a shared purpose. Göring's dismissal of American industrial capacity stands as one of history's most catastrophic misjudgments. His contempt for democratic production cost Germany the war, and millions of lives. The failure to recognize American capabilities sealed the Third Reich's fate long before the first bomber reached German skies. The leap from producing 3,000 aircraft per year to nearly 100,000 proved that free societies, when confronted with existential threats, can accomplish what once seemed impossible. American workers did not merely meet Roosevelt's audacious goal, they doubled it. They did not simply match German output, they exceeded it fivefold while simultaneously waging war in the Pacific. Modern leaders would do well to remember Göring's error. Dismissing democratic nations as weak because they are peaceful, or underestimating the productive power of free people because they favor prosperity over conquest, invites catastrophic miscalculation. In 1940, America appeared unprepared for war. By 1944, it had become an unstoppable industrial colossus. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines could be as decisive as front lines, that assembly workers could matter as much as soldiers, and that industrial mobilization could determine victory as surely as battlefield strategy. Göring learned this truth too late, at the cost of his nation's destruction. From his scornful reaction to Roosevelt's announcement in May 1940 to his death at Nuremberg in October 1946, Hermann Göring's story traced the arc of Nazi Germany's collapse. His contempt for American production became the epitaph of the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology with capability, mistook tyranny for strength, and believed racial mythology could overcome industrial mathematics. The Reichsmarshal who dismissed American aircraft production died knowing that in 1944 alone, American factories had built more planes than Germany managed throughout the entire war. His scorn for democratic industrial capacity became the costliest misjudgment in history, a mistake paid for an absolute defeat. The United States built 295,959 military aircraft. Germany produced 94,677. Yet the decisive victory lay not in totals alone, but in the method that made those totals possible. The war proved that free labor could outperform forced labor, that voluntary cooperation could surpass authoritarian command, and that a society composed of immigrants and diverse citizens could unite to accomplish what dictators deemed impossible. The B-24 bombers emerging from Willow Run's assembly line every 63 minutes were more than machines of war. They were a tangible rebuke to tyranny. Every rivet was driven by a woman who, only months earlier, had never set foot in a factory. Every engine was assembled by a teenager who had left school to contribute. Every wing took shape at the hands of workers who had escaped poverty, exclusion, and discrimination. Together, they demonstrated that free people, bound by a shared purpose, could overwhelm oppression with sheer productive force. Hermann Göring ridiculed the notion that America could build 50,000 aircraft a year. The United States answered by producing nearly twice that number, and in doing so, reshaped the course of world history. His laughter became an echo of catastrophic miscalculation, the sound of a regime fatally misreading both democracy and industry. In the end, the system Göring dismissed destroyed him. Democracy's arsenal buried both the man and the ideology he served beneath nearly 300,000 aircraft, transforming contempt into the most complete defeat history had yet recorded. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. See you in the next video.